I died last night. But I'm still here. So this actually happened last week. It just took me some time to come to terms with it. I got a phone call from my next door neighbor late in the evening asking if I can help him move a mattress into his upstairs. His mom is ill and has a big heavy sleep number bed. I of course ran over to help because they're great neighbors. I get over there and his friend, who is also a priest, was there to help. I helped them figure out how to separate the mattress from the bed so we could fit it upstairs. We get it all moved up and back in place when my neighbor asks if I can help them move an armoire upstairs too. I think nothing of it and we pull it out of his travel trailer and start bringing it up the front stairs of his house. This is where I died. The front stairs are 11 steps. I was on the lower end of the armoire about 6 steps up when my neighbor and his friend lose a handle on the armoire and it comes crashing down on me and I fall backwards towards the pavement. I then wake up in my dining room to my phone ringing and my wife asking me if I'm going to answer the phone. It's my neighbor asking me if I can help move a bed upstairs for his mom. I go over there and meet his priest friend again, as this has been the first time I met him. I say I can help with the bed but I cannot help with the armoire. My neighbor was like, "How'd you know about the armoire?" I then proceeded to tell them I'm pretty sure I just died. I spent the next hour talking with the priest. He had so many questions. My neighbor didn't believe it until I described the upstairs bedroom in perfect detail down to the metal mattress frame on the floor and the intricate headboard leaning against the wall, and I had never been upstairs in their house before. The priest asked me what I saw after I died. I told him I never actually died. Before it happened I woke up at my dining room table. I have chosen one of my parents' death 5 minutes before it happened. It is a tragic and strangest story happened 7 years ago. This is the first time I am sharing it with someone. I haven't shared it even with my mother. Year 2017 summer. I returned to my home country after 1 year from a university abroad. My father picked me up from the airport, and we had dinner at home. Everything was as usual as it could be. I went bed around 12 p.m. and slept immediately. I woke up around 5 a.m. to pee, and went directly to the bathroom which is in my room, so I didn't step out of my room. We all think different things when peeing, such as the color of the walls or what to eat for breakfast. For this time, out of nowhere I started thinking that if I were to choose one, would I choose my mother or my father as being dead? Then, I thought my sister would be devastated without my mother, and my father cannot handle my sister in her teenage years. I decided that absence of my father would be easier than losing my mother. I finished peeing and just about to get back to my bed, I heard a strong snoring noise. My father was always snoring since my childhood, and sometimes we were having fun with it. However, this time it felt stronger and not natural. The noise led me to the living room where I found my father lying on the couch, with a little blood on his nose. I tried to woke him up, but he was unconscious. I called 911, woke my mother up, but once we arrived to the hospital, he was passed away. He was 48. Doctors said it is because cerebral hemorrhage by high blood pressure. We don't know what time it happened. I am still confused with the situation. I wasn't there for 1 year, and had the chance of having one last dinner and conversation with my father. I found him like that and acted with cold blood. I can't imagine the trauma they would live through if my mother or sister would find him lying on the couch. And of course, I still think, why did I think such thing in the bathroom, and what would happen if I would choose my mother? Thank you for reading and sharing my memory.
The same guy died twice? 7 years ago while visiting my grandparents, they told me their next-door neighbor's son committed suicide in their house a few days prior. He was about 30 and had some tough mental health struggles. It was fairly traumatic as he had children in the house who witnessed the event. The children were sent to my grandparents' house for a few hours while ambulances were called and the scene was cleared up. It was clearly horrendous for all involved, and the somber conversation took up most of the afternoon with my grandmother breaking down in tears. My grandmother sadly passed between then and now, and my grandfather is also getting on in life. My mother called me a few weeks ago to tell me my grandparents' neighbor's son had committed suicide the day before and essentially retold me the entire story down to the children going to my granddad's house while their home is cleared up. I told her I knew it had happened years ago. She told me it was just yesterday. Both utterly confused, I ended the call and was genuinely worried about my mother. She's late 50s now, retelling me old stories. So I called my very elderly granddad, who broke down on the phone and was utterly shell-shocked, telling me he had to look after the poor kids. So I'm thinking maybe my granddad is having issues with his memory and has retold my mother, and somehow she didn't remember it happening years ago. Wanting to check my own sanity at this point, I called my daughter and she confirmed with me that I had told her the guy had passed away years ago. It was common knowledge and I'm sure we had discussed it many times. We came to the conclusion my grandfather was accidentally gaslighting my mom. Only he wasn't. The funeral was the following week, they both attended it and the death was in the local newspaper. My granddad has zero recollection of telling me with my grandma years ago. Lost time while driving on freeway. I was coming home from spending an evening in LA, live in OC, lived in LA for a bit, know the area and freeways really well, and have an excellent sense of direction, and found myself headed in the opposite direction of where I needed to be heading with no memory of switching to the northbound freeway. I was a little bit tired, but vividly remember getting off of the main streets of the middle of the city and onto the southbound 101 freeway. My drive was around 40 minutes long at that point, Waze said so. All of a sudden I looked down at my phone, and my drive is over an hour long, after having been traveling for at least 20 minutes. I'm on the 405 North, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is miles and miles away from the 101 freeway. A jolt of energy went through my body as though I had just woken up and I was absolutely freaked out. I was nearing LAX headed north, so I got off at the next exit and made a left and got onto the southbound 405. This was not the direction or even same freeway that I was on for at least 20 minutes, and I have absolutely no clue how I got on this road. I started crying and flipping out but told myself to just relax and head home. I had to keep checking that I was going the right way. I was, finally. It was so freaky because I know these roads like I know every centimeter of my face. What do you think this could have been? How did I lose that time? Why do I remember those 20 minutes, watching the time of my drive decrease as I was approaching my destination, and then with a snap of a finger I was an hour away on a different freeway and in the wrong direction?
I think I died in early July. Do you guys know the whole theory about how when people die in one timeline, they shift into another? I think that may have happened to me. Back in early July of this year, my family, M45, F54, me:19, B16, S13 were going on a road trip to Montana to visit our grandparents. Prior to the trip, I had a horrible feeling about going. I kept having flashes of car accidents in my head, and I was sure that we were going to get in one if we left. It was so strange, because I have a pretty severe anxiety disorder, but this didn't feel like my anxiety at all, and I never have anxiety about road trips. I love them. So we left Saturday of that week. I had told my parents I had a bad feeling about driving up there, but they dismissed me as being anxious, but I had never felt so certain about something in my life. Getting into that car felt like signing my death sentence. So we get about 6 hours in, and at this point, I start to think I was being ridiculous, and a wave of calmness just washes over me. This is where shit gets strange. My dad passes an underpass and everything just shifts. I feel like I saw everything in slow motion for a whole 4 or so minutes. My parents were joking beforehand, but their faces moved so slowly, and then the light in the car started to shift. This was the scary part because I thought I must have been going insane. For a few seconds, there was a huge illumination of light into our car, and I looked at my family, and could not tell who they were or what they meant to me. And then it's like everything just came back. The light shifted back, and I knew who everyone was, but it felt like something imperceptible had changed. I closed my eyes and tried to make sense of the past few minutes, and when I reached back to remember, I saw blood, our car and another minivan in shambles on the side of the highway right beyond the underpass, and mangled bodies. I remembered sensations I should not have known, what spattered brain matter looks like, the smell of something burning, the way I couldn't breathe. But this never happened? Yet I remember that the car in front of us had switched lanes even though there was a truck in front of us, realized it at the last second, and hit us with a lateral impact. I have no history of psychosis, and I have never been in any sort of car accident. This wasn't PTSD, and I have never had anxiety over being in the car in any sort of way prior to this. And maybe I could have just brushed it off, but I still think about it when I'm driving in my own car. And it's made me a more cautious driver. I don't know what happened, it was just a weird situation, and I remember having the distinct feeling in that moment that I had died in some sense. I am not a spiritually sensitive person by any means, I am a scientist at heart, but this truly was something I cannot explain.
My 3-year insisted I was having a baby and described her perfectly. A few years ago, when my daughter was 3, I decided to go back to school and become a nurse. My husband and I were in no way trying for a baby whatsoever. I was on birth control and we were very careful. I walk into her preschool one day to find the director and her teachers telling me congratulations with big smiles on their faces. I used to work as a preschool teacher here, so a lot of these people were close friends of mine. I ask them what they're congratulating me for, and they tell me that my daughter announced to everyone that mommy has a little sister in her tummy. I laughed it off and told them all I was sorry to disappoint them, but that just wasn't true. My daughter and I went home and talked about it. I told her mommy didn't have a baby in her tummy, and she just kept pointing at my belly and saying, "Yes, you do." As if I were lying to her. A few days later, I wake up to someone touching my belly. My daughter has the bottom of my shirt pulled up with her head resting on my belly while she rubs it gently and says, "Baby sister, what are you doing hiding in there?" It was really sweet, and I just assumed she really wanted a little sister. She had never expressed any interest in having a sibling prior to this, and we never discussed it. We had the talk again and she got upset with me and told me she has seen her before and she is in there. She told me that her sister looks different than us and has blonde hair and blue eyes with little holes in her cheeks, aka dimples. My daughter, husband and I all have very dark hair, chocolate brown eyes and no dimples. I talk to her about wanting a sibling and tell her that when I finish school we will try to give her a little brother or sister. Again, she's frustrated and yelling I already have a sister. I was expecting my period to start within the next week like clockwork. It didn't. I took a pregnancy test and just stared at that faint positive result for what felt like forever. I was completely in shock. I was on birth control, so immediately called my OB-GYN and they saw me the next day. It was estimated that I was 4 weeks and 6 days pregnant. I gave birth to a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl with the sweetest dimples. This experience has always blown my mind. My whole life is different and no one believes me. I am sorry if this is the wrong place to post this. Mandela Effect doesn't allow personal stories, only stuff with proof. This is gonna be long. This Wednesday, February 5th, on the way to work I went to my usual gas station. I go there every day, 5 days a week. I go in and everything is different. All new drink stations have been installed and the food area is completely redone. None of this was different Tuesday morning. I couldn't believe that they'd redone a gas station in one night. I then go outside and see that 2 gas pumps are completely gone and there is mulch bags stacked taking up all the space. None of this was there the day before. I then leave and head to work and somehow turn on the wrong street and get lost. I've been driving these neighborhoods for months, and suddenly I'm lost trying to find my job. I get to work a few minutes later and I'm panicking. I know it's silly, but I've always feared changing timelines. My fiancé and I have a timeline safe word, so we know we are together. I call and ask him and he has no idea what I'm talking about. We just talked about it at the end of January and we've had it established for a while. I've even woken him up at night and asked him after having a nightmare and he's known. But now he has no idea what I'm talking about. Then the girls start coming downstairs. I work in an addictions group home, and one girl keeps saying how confused she is and how nothing makes sense today. Later in the day another kept saying all she wanted to do was cry and she had no idea why. Then while running errands I go down the same street I always do and suddenly there are 4 houses gone and a grove of trees planted. I've never seen them before and really started freaking. They are next to a building my family owned for the last 20 years. I know the whole neighborhood. My final straw was calling my mom today. She said my sister was going out tonight with her friend Jenna. I have known Jenna since 2003. I asked how much longer until Jenna has her baby. My mom goes silent and asks what the heck I'm talking about. She says she's never been pregnant. I look her up online, nothing. I asked my sister just a half hour ago and she laughs in my face and says Jenna is infertile and will never have kids. I literally remember the day my sister told me she was pregnant. She told me to guess who and Jenna was my third guess. What the hell is happening to my life?
I've been seeing the same guy at random for over 20 years all over creation. This is a topic that has questioned my sanity and haunted me for years and years. I've been seeing the same man since I was in my late teens. I'm 38 years old now. I started seeing him in random places around the age of 17. I live in a heavily populated area and I have lived all over the tri-state area. I've seen him in parking lots, I've seen him in stores, I've seen him at events, but the craziest one was I saw him at a destination wedding in St. Martin about 10 years ago. I approached him at the wedding and asked him if he has been following me for years because I see him all over the place. As you can imagine, the conversation immediately became one of the awkwardest ones I've ever been a part of. He kind of laughed and shrugged it off, but I could tell he knew he was seeing me all over the place also. There's been spans of over a year to 2 years where I don't see him whatsoever and it seems like it comes in waves. My life has changed considerably as you can imagine. Since the age of 17 I now have a wife and a child. My most recent sightings of the guy was in a store called Bye Bye Baby. I was buying things for my newborn. Within the same month I saw him in a Home Depot about 30 miles away. Every time this happens he pretends like he doesn't see me, but I can tell he's as sketched out as I am. The last sighting of this guy was a couple months ago in the store for baby stuff and that was the final straw. I'm telling you, if I see this guy again I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I don't even care what it takes. It's something I've pondered over for so long, and like I said, I question my own sanity. I'm also a male, for frame of reference, and the guy that I've been seeing is a lot older than me, but it seems like he hasn't aged a bit, as crazy as that sounds. Like I said, I know the man is real, I've talked to him face to face. But that still doesn't make me question my own sanity.
I died in late 2015. I was given a second chance. Rewind back to September 2015, I was a freshman who had just entered high school 2 weeks prior. Already school was weighing down on me, and I'd been continuing a habit I had of going on walks to clear my mind. On this day, I'd been walking around a pond near my house. There's a trail that goes around the pond, and then the trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which sit about 15 feet above the path and pond below. After walking the circle, I was crossing the train tracks when I decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take the path below the train tracks, but there isn't any way to cross the pond without going all the way back around, and being 14 years old, I decided that I could just jump from the tracks onto the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half-conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry and the paramedics sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I think they were both broken. The scene continued on for a few minutes, until we arrived at the hospital and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. I only had a few minutes in EMERG before I eventually lost all consciousness, and that was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like about an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I just hit the ground after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I jumped, but there had been a car parked watching me. I think they thought I was attempting suicide, but it probably looked that way, and the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance for me. The ambulance ride had been the exact same as it was the first time, and I was put into the same emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events were that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much more minor. I was discharged from the hospital the same night, with only stitches in my lip, a slightly fractured jaw and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed that the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I'd had while I was unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks after, when my mom told me that the people who had helped me said that I had been conscious the entire time, I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything. So, that entire scenario managed to happen in the few seconds it took for me to hit the ground, while I was still conscious. I'm 17 now, and I still have no way to explain what happened that day, other than I died, and was given a second chance.
I think I just became the background character for another person's glitch. This technically happened last night, but I was just starting a graveyard shift and I'm only now getting it all down. I work at a gas station chain with only numbers in its name. We're just outside of a large chunk of suburbs, none of that middle of nowhere, like we aren't exactly near any other businesses, but we are rarely completely dead for hours at a time. It was just past midnight, and with everything going on in the US right now, not a lot of things other than gas stations and bars are open at night anymore, so it was a slower evening. I was the only one in the store and a car pulled up to one of the two double-sided pumps out front. Pretty standard white four-door. I'm not great with car brands, but it was a little nicer, like upper middle class and probably only a few years old. A woman gets out and starts walking towards our door like she's in a daze. Legit, this woman looked like she saw a ghost. She wanders up, sort of freezes at the door for a second with a 1,000-yard stare before opening it and coming in. She didn't go looking for anything, didn't start shopping, just sort of stood inside for what felt like ages. Again, bars are still open, so I think maybe she's a little drunk or had a rough night or something, so I give the usual welcome to gas station, let me know if you need any help finding anything, and she finally notices me and immediately asks me the weirdest damn question I have ever been asked on the job. You can see me, right? Yeah. Like, what else do you say? She breaks down crying in the middle of my store, so I'm already headed around the corner to see what's up. I have my cell phone out in case I need to call the cops or something for her. I get her to sit down on a nearby pallet of soda and I'm grabbing her a bottle of water, and after she catches her breath a little she tells me I thought I had died. Again, I'm thinking maybe she is on something, but she's a middle-aged woman who looks like a standard local suburban housewife. We're a pretty boring township without your average junkies like you'd find closer to the cities. So she asks if she can call her husband to pick her up and wait with me. She has her own phone and does so, not really telling him anything either, just where she is at and if he can come get her. He says he'll call an Uber and be there as soon as possible. We're waiting. So far nobody else has showed up, so I'm keeping most of my attention on her, and eventually she starts to explain to me. I was driving home from dinner with my coworkers, and as I'm driving through nearby intersection I recognized a truck ran a red light and hit me. Now, her car is still at the pump without a scratch on it. She goes on to say she remembers her car being pushed into a pole, going airborne, and then nothing. I tried to calm her down, letting her know that her car is out front and it looks fine, but she insisted that she completely blacked out, woke up in an ambulance for a split second, passed out again, and then woke up again in the driver's seat of her car at the intersection waiting for the light to change, perfectly fine. This whole thing freaked her out so badly that she drove to the nearest anything, us, just so she could get out of the car. Husband eventually showed up to get her. He asked if I had any idea what happened, and even though she sort of explained to me, I just shrugged because no, I had no idea what was happening anymore. She reluctantly got into the passenger seat of the car and he drove them back home. That was hours ago, after which I worked an entire shift at the station trying to wrap my head around what the absolute hell I had just witnessed. My dad's gut feeling. I was 17 at the time, and me and my dad had just finished our fishing trip, and it was almost midnight, mid-fall. When I was about to get in the car, he told me that he did not want me to sit in the front seat on the ride home. We argued about it for about 5 minutes and he did not give any good reason to why he did not want me to. I gave up and got in the back seat. It was pitch black outside. When we had been driving on the main road for about 2 minutes, we saw a car driving in our lane. Right as we were about to collide, my dad swerved into the other lane, and so did the car in front of us. I heard my dad say I knew it at the very last second, and then I blacked out. Woke up when police showed up at the scene. They helped me out of the car. I was barely conscious and don't remember much after that. Only thing that is still a crystal clear memory is that I saw my dad, sitting in the car waving at me with tears in his eyes. When I later asked where my dad was, I was told that he had flown out of the car window and landed only a few feet from the car and passed away later in the ambulance. I was told the man we crashed with died on impact and also had a 17-year-old daughter in the back seat who survived. I still can't believe that this really happened. This was 6 years ago. Edit, I believe that the gut feeling he had was that something terrible is about to happen, and if someone is going to die, he chose himself instead of me. Therefore, I believed he decided not to put the seatbelt on. Also, I believe that it was his spirit saying goodbye since he wasn't able to do it.
He thinks we both died. I'd like to preface this by saying my husband is an electrical engineer and I'm a teacher. We're not crazy people. So, back when my husband and I were dating, my husband was in a terrible car crash. His truck hit black ice and he slid into oncoming traffic. His truck was completely totaled. So was the other truck he hit. The weird thing is though, both he and the other guy were completely fine. Not a scratch on them, all my husband had was a bruise on his knee. The first responders were baffled, as was the towing company and insurance when they realized no one had died/was severely injured. Fast forward to a few days after the crash, my husband comes over to my apartment. We're having a conversation about a university class we're both in, and he casually asks when I got the flat screen TV sitting on my dresser. At this point I'm very confused because I've had a little flat screen since I was 13 and had had it the entire year and a bit we've been dating. I asked him what he's talking about, as I've always had that TV. He told me to quit pulling his leg and asked me what I did with the old tube TV. I had no idea what he was talking about and told him so. He's convinced I had a tube TV. I proceed to get on Facebook and showed him a picture we had taken 2 weeks prior with the TV in the background. It's a flat screen in the picture. My husband goes white like he's seen a ghost and just stares into space for a minute. His eyes started to water. I asked him what's wrong and he said, "I swear to God, I'm not crazy. You've had a tube TV since we started dating." It was a tube TV when we took that picture. I brushed it off as his head being rattled from the accident, and he didn't bring it up again. However, anytime we hung out in my room, he'd always look at the TV weird. Fast forward 7 years, my husband and I have been married for a few years and decide that we're ready to be parents. I'm not on birth control and we decide whatever happens, happens. We're not actively trying, but not preventing it either. So we're on vacation in Italy, wandering around Rome and I feel like shit. I had had my period the week before and it was the worst one I had had in my whole life. As we're walking around I am suffering from back pain, chills and horrific cramping. I go to the bathroom in a cafe and hurl my guts out, have diarrhea and realize I'm menstruating, heavily. Obviously I'm weirded out since I had just had my period the week before. I clean myself up, go back to my husband and tell him I think I need a doctor. I have a pretty high pain tolerance but this is insane. It's getting to the point I'm having trouble walking and I'm starting to feel pain in my shoulders. I don't want to ruin our vacation but I'm starting to really worry. My husband is smarter than me, sees the state I'm in and says I'm visibly paler than when I went into the bathroom and gets me help. 20 minutes later I'm on a stretcher and being taken to the hospital. An hour after that I'm being prepped for emergency surgery as doctor tells me I have a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, I have heavy internal bleeding and if he doesn't perform surgery I am going to die. 6 hours later I wake up very sore and tired. Doctor tells me I'm very lucky, and if I had waited any longer to seek medical attention I'd be dead. Husband stays with me in the hospital the first night and gets a hotel for the rest of my stay. A week later we're cleared to fly home and I go through a grueling month of healing from the surgery. 2 months after our return, somehow my husband and I get on the topic of fires and he goes on about the dangers of kitchen fires and I say, no need to worry, we're all set with the extinguisher in the closet. He looks at me like I have 3 heads and asks me what I'm talking about. I remind him about the extinguisher in the front closet where we keep the coats. We've had it for 3 years. He insisted we buy one when we bought our house. My husband shakes his head and tells me he has no idea what I'm talking about and we don't have a fire extinguisher. I remind him about, not only my memories of fighting about if we really needed one, where to put it, buying it from Home Depot, but also installing it to the wall in the closet. He looks at me with confusion and tells me none of that happened. I get up, go to front closet to show it to him all the while cursing him for being an asshole for forgetting our 2-week fight about it and lo and behold, no extinguisher. Not only is there no extinguisher, there's no holes in the wall where I know we installed it. No fresh paint, this wall has never been touched. I insist he's moved it and fixed the wall and ask why the fuck he would play such a stupid prank. He continues to insist we've never had one, let alone talked about getting one. This goes on for several minutes. I'm approaching hysterics, telling him to quit playing with me when finally he says, now you know how I feel about that TV. We didn't speak about it for a long time. Then after I found this thread he brought up his theory that perhaps in another timeline/dimension, whatever you want to call it, we both actually died and we reset like a video game and the TV and extinguisher are glitches. I don't know if I agree with him, all I know is that I have never been so rattled in my whole life and every time I get something out of the closet I'm overwhelmed with this feeling of wrongness. I know it should be there but somehow it's just not. I can't explain it. He says he will go to his grave swearing I had a tube TV. My friend was at my flat but disappeared halfway through. Long-time casual lurker. I'm creeped TF out and not quite sure what to do with myself. I had a friend over last night. We ran into each other earlier in the day and we made plans to have dinner together. She comes over and we hang out on the couch for around an hour, just chatting and whatnot. I stand up because I get a phone call so I go into my bedroom for around 10 to 15 minutes. I go back out and she's not there anymore. Okay, so she's in the bathroom, right? I sit on the couch to wait for her but she doesn't come out. I go check on her, the bathroom is empty. Now I'm weirded out, did she leave for no reason? I didn't hear the door open/close and I have a pretty heavy door. I even go outside into the hallway to check if she was there for some reason, but she's just promptly disappeared. So now I'm thinking she left for whatever reason so I call her. It rings for a while and she picks up. Immediately I think it's weird, if she left my flat, she should be on the street, but it's very quiet wherever she is and she sounds like she just woke up. I ask her why she left my flat and she had no idea what I was talking about. I get frustrated and ask where she is. I'm at home taking a nap. Your phone call woke me up. I could hear rustling sheets and as I said, there's no way her side of the phone call would be so quiet if she just left my flat. I live in a busy area. I request a video call her and there she is, in her home, in her bed. She has no makeup on, she's in her PJs, looking confused and her eyes are still kinda puffy from sleep. I ask her if she remembered coming to my flat. She looked confused. Did we make plans today? She said that after running into me, all we did was chat, say goodbye, and then she went home to take a nap. Obviously there's no way she got home, removed her makeup, undid her hair and changed her clothes within 15 minutes? She lives like half an hour away from me. I have no clue what to think of it.
Something is wrong with my girlfriend. Me, M26, and my girlfriend, F25, have been living together in an apartment for 2.5 years. Everything has been normal until quarantine started, around 4 weeks ago, when I started noticing some odd things. For instance, for the last 3 weeks or so, my GF has been putting sugar in her morning coffee, while throughout our entire relationship she's always been very much against it. It may seem like a small detail, but she's always been complaining about how I don't know what real coffee is since I put quite a lot of sugar. On the first day that I saw her drinking coffee with sugar, I asked her why would she do that, and she looked at me weirded out and said something like, "What are you talking about? I've always been putting sugar in my coffee." I felt a bit confused for a moment, but then we started talking about some other things, so I didn't think any more about it until the morning after, when she did the exactly same thing, and had once again the same reaction. Fast forward a few days and another odd thing happened. We were having sex and she suddenly suggested a sex pose that we had already tried once, but it had gone wrong and it hurt her a lot, so we had simply decided not to try it anymore. Naturally, I was very surprised with her suggestion, and reminded her about the time when it went wrong, and she just completely dismissed it, saying that I probably mixed her up with some ex-girlfriend or that I was just tripping. We then did the pose and we actually enjoyed it. Today, the weirdest thing happened, which is the reason I'm writing this post. In the afternoon, I was working at home. I'm employed as a PhD student at the computer science department of a university, when my GF asked me what's up with a guy who I've never heard of before. I asked her who is she referring to, and she said, "Well, it's that colleague of yours who you always talk about, the one from the company where you were employed at." I froze, and asked her to repeat, and she said the exactly same thing all over again. Then I told her that I don't work at any company, nor have I ever worked at any company, since I started a PhD straight after my master degree. At this point, she also completely froze and we were just staring at each other completely confused and shocked for a few moments. She then asked me WTF is going on, and I reminded her about the coffee thing and about the sex pose and that I don't know anymore what is going on. At this point, she started crying too and asked what is wrong with us. Nor she, nor me, nor anyone in both families have ever had any mental problems in the past. We don't know what to do about this. Can anyone explain what's wrong with us?
Me and my daughter witnessed something surreal and unexplainable today. For a few weeks before this, while out driving, I've observed pedestrians standing at the traffic lights who will reach into their pocket and look at their phone as they're walking across the road when the light goes green. Nothing significant or strange about this, just one of those mundane things you notice while going about your day. Today I was driving with my daughter and we stopped at a red light at a crossing and there was a man standing there. Nothing out of the ordinary, denim jacket, black cap, glasses, around 6'2". I thought I'd try to weird out my young daughter. She's 5, so I knew I was going to blow her damn mind, so I said, "See that man? When the walking man goes green and he starts to walk across, he'll reach into his pocket and pull out his phone and start looking at it. Watch and see." As he walks across, he reaches into his pocket but then immediately takes his hand out and looks and points right at me with his mouth open, smiling, like a gotcha stance. Of course my daughter found this absolutely hilarious and I sat there completely mind blown. I must have sat there in silence looking at him walk across for the next 10 seconds. I drove on and had a look at him as I drove past, and he was smirking/laughing. I've been playing it through my head all day. The windows were up. The radio was on. I wasn't shouting. My voice was not even remotely raised. He must have been about 15 to 20 feet away from me. I can't figure out at all how he could have heard me. It's literally impossible. How did he know I was trying to predict he'd reach into his pocket for his phone? The only even remote possibility I can think of is that he has had the same observation as me and that I might be thinking the same thing, so just went for it. But realistically, what are even the chances of this?
My 5-year-old son broke character and talked to me like an adult. This happened about 2 years ago and I was so blown away I took notes and told my wife about it, so I still have the notes on my phone. My 5-year-old son was pretty typical for his age, always goofing around, never serious, always working some angle to negotiate treats or buying whatever thing was at the top of his list this week. Kids have a selfish worldview and that's mostly understandable because they haven't matured yet. So when my son asked me to go for a walk, just the two of us, I immediately laughed and thought, okay, what's he going to ask for? We start walking and I ask, "What's on your mind, buddy?" He said, "Nothing really, I just want to have some time to be with you and be peaceful and be out in nature." Wow, okay, this is progress, I thought. Then he said, "I want you to know you're the best dad I've ever had. You really do help me and my sister a lot and you're really very nice, even though we don't usually tell you. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything and that I want to be near you always." By this point, the only reason I wasn't completely crying my eyes out is that I thought it was some kind of a joke or lead up to ask for something. This was totally out of character, especially at this age. I managed to croak out something like, "I'm really glad to hear that and I love you very much." Then we just enjoyed the rest of the walk. It really felt like for a moment I was speaking to a soul who has had several lives. "You're the best dad I've ever had," and wanted to speak directly to me instead of play the role of a child. I'm so glad it happened and it's something I will never forget. Later he went right back to being the same old goofy kid that I love. Sister with DS knows things about people she's never met. A bit of backstory. My little sister has Down syndrome. If you're not aware what DS is, here is some info on it. From my understanding about DS, many people with it are on the autistic spectrum. My sister is considered high-functioning autistic as well as having DS. Okay, here are the stories. Our mom had tons of difficulties with her pregnancy with Diana, and had multiple strange occurrences while she was pregnant with her. The main one being that, at around 6 months along in the pregnancy, our mom walked into her bathroom to find the box holding her wedding dress on the floor. That box had been in the attic since we had moved into that house. No one in the house knew how it got there. Mom started having contractions just after that incident, and started bleeding. Dad took her to the ER, and after a day of her being in intensive care and having multiple tests done, my parents discovered that Diana has DS. After Mom gets out of the hospital, she sits me and my older sisters down to talk to us about this, telling us that Diana will have an abnormality, her words, and explains to us that she will be different than normal kids. I remember very clearly that everyone but me was crying. I remember saying something along the lines of, "But none of us are normal." Mind you, I was 12 and for sure my family is not very normal. Fast forward. Diana is born premature. I believe she was born at 7 months, but could be off a bit, has a ton of medical issues and has to have surgery immediately after being born. She was in NICU for the first 2 months of her life. We finally get to bring her home after she recovers. She was the tiniest little thing. By the time Diana was about 6 months old, my parents started doing physical and speech therapy with her, because she wasn't developing the way a normal baby would have been by that age, I guess. I remember we were learning sign language with her until she was about 2 years because my mom was afraid she wouldn't be verbal. Mom couldn't have been more wrong. Diana started babbling by about 8 months, and she'd always just lay flat on her back and talk to the ceiling, and just giggle like someone was playing with her. Mom always joked that Diana was talking to angels. Fast forward again to when Diana is about 3 or 4 years old. My mom, Diana, and myself are at a little Christmas party at a place for physically and mentally disabled people, where Diana took classes and the rest of us volunteered. The 3 of us are sitting in these pews waiting for Santa Claus to come on stage, so all the kids can go have their photo taken with him. Out of nowhere, Diana stands up and runs away from my mom and me, into the crowd. We chase her, and she runs straight toward this older woman we had never met. Diana grabs the woman's leg and starts bawling. My mom and I are apologizing to the woman, saying we don't know what got into her. The woman looks down at Diana and asks her what's wrong. This is where it gets weird. Diana tells her, word for word, in the clearest way I had heard her speak, "I'm so sorry that your mommy left you." The woman starts tearing up, and tells us that her mother had passed away a couple nights prior after a long battle with cancer. The second time Diana freaked us out. I was visiting with my mom and Diana when she was about 10. Diana starts telling me how she talks to Grandpa all the time. He passed away when she was about 5, and starts telling me that she met Grandpa's wife. Grandpa's wife, our step-grandmother, was still alive at this point, and that's the only grandma Diana ever knew, so I tell her of course you've met Grandma. She corrects me and says no, Mommy's mommy. My mom and I both froze. Our mom's mom passed away when our mom was pregnant with my older sister, meaning none of us had ever met her. So our mom starts asking Diana questions about Grandma. She asks what color was my mommy's hair? And Diana responds yellow, but not real. Mom goes on to explain to me that Grandma wore wigs because she had been balding after years of battling anorexia, and she's always wore big blonde wigs. So, Mom asks Diana, do you know Grandma's name? She says Jeannie, which was in fact our grandmother's name. Diana had never heard about Jeannie. It's a very sore subject to bring up around our mom, so none of us really know much about her. There have been so many other instances of her just knowing things, like when I was in a very abusive relationship, that none of my family knew about, and she once called me in the middle of the night, crying hysterically that I needed to leave my house and come home. After that phone call, my fiancé came home drunk and beat the living shit out of me. I left him after that, and honestly can't say I would have had the strength to leave had it not been for that call from my little sister. Even to this day, she says she talks to Grandma, Grandpa, and other people who have passed away.
My cat died last October. He was 19 years old and he died of congestive heart failure. It was a devastating loss for me. I saw him as my son, especially after living with him for 20 years. I kept hoping and praying he would come to me in dreams, and for a whole year he didn't. About 3 weeks ago, I finally have a dream where I see my old cat and I tell him that I loved him and I hugged him and we're hanging out like we used to. When I wake up, I'm all happy and I go to tell my daughter that I had a dream with my cat. Not even 30 minutes later, this little black cat, about 6 months old, shows up at my back porch. And of course, I knew that it was not my cat, at least not then. The minute I let the cat into the house, he went straight for my bed where he used to hang out, and he sat in the exact same place where he used to sit when he was younger. I can't explain it, except there's little things that he does, like looking for the litter box exactly where the litter box used to be. He also doesn't want to go where his old body lays. Every time he walks around that area, he kind of runs away from it. He has the same habits as an older cat, and understands so much more than a normal kitten. He's also really chill and calm, the same way that my old cat was. Which is bizarre for a kitten his age. I know it could just be me projecting onto this little kitten and I'm trying not to do that, but he keeps doing things that are really weird. He even answers to his old name, but right now I just call him Kitty for the most part. So I get it. But I'm not crazy. I'm fully aware of what I'm saying, I'm not in denial. I was fully at peace with the fact that my cat had passed away. I don't really have any more evidence than what I have stated. But he's not the only one that I think has reincarnated. When my daughter was 4 years old, she told me that I kept calling her name. And I said, "What are you talking about?" I was not calling your name. But my daughter's name is my grandmother's name. I knew this when I told her that, but I was trying to see what she would say. And she insisted that yes, I was calling her name and that's why she came. She said she was supposed to go to another planet, but instead, she came here to be with me. My teenage daughter has no recollection of ever saying this, but I wrote it down so I would never forget. When I asked her what this place was, she told me one thing which put chills down my spine, the name Lavinia. I had never heard that name come out of anybody's mouth before. The only one time that I had ever heard that name was in a book about a ship named the USS Lavinia. I found that name so entrancing that all I remember about that book is that ship's name. I can't even find the book again. I've looked everywhere. It's almost as if it never existed. I read it one summer when I was 10 years old. So imagine me at 36 years old hearing my 4-year-old tell me that one name that had haunted me and had never heard in 26 years. Nobody today is named that, it's a name from the 1800s. And to me, that was a sign. Because I knew that name was special to me, but I didn't know why. And apparently Lavinia was the caretaker when she was in that other world. She called it the world of a lot of light. So no doubt that Lavinia is something of mine, too, and that I will also see her when I pass. One last thing before this becomes an epic novel. If you're hurting because somebody that you lost has gone away, just know that there may be a way for them to come back. It won't be exactly the same, but there will be things that will let you know that it is them. I'm so happy now that my loved ones are back. It's been a beautiful experience, and I hope the same for anyone reading this. Big cyber hug from me.
Had my glitch and it's consumed my day with confusion. I, am 42, am relatively successful though not as successful as I should be or as big of a failure as I deserve. I have a great wife, F34, and 2 wonderful children, 3 and 5. I went to bed last night a near perfectly happy man. For reference, I had a GF from the age of 17 to 21 that I remained very close friends with until I met my wife 10 years ago. Her and I both decided a close friendship wasn't possible, mostly due to the fact that we were hit or miss on rekindling our relationship for a decade. What I can only account for as a dream completely consumed my day. The only reason I say this is because I remember going to bed in the same house I woke up in with my wife this morning. I was at a gathering with my wife and children and my old GF was there with her now husband. I got up to get a drink and she approached me asking me to go to a back room and enter a closet. She was insistent on me accompanying her. I went inside and this is where it was dreamy. It was almost third-person omniscient. I remember standing in her parents' driveway discussing our breakup because she was going to another city for college. But it was like a do-over. We watched our conversation and this time I agreed to move with her. I stepped into my own body 21 years ago and got in my truck and drove home, and from that moment I relived my life as though I moved with her. I looked in the mirror and I was 21 again. She was there narrating the whole thing. She graduated while I worked and then I went to college while she worked and then we got married. We were at our wedding. Celebrating at our reception. I remembered our honeymoon in Mexico. It seemed to move fast, but we had a son, then a daughter. Went on vacations. We were in love and happy. I had a career completely different than the one I have now. We had an incredibly nice home. Friends. I had memories of my new friends and was enjoying the different life. We would lay in bed at night and I'd ask about my current wife and the life her and had on the other side and she could take me and show me. Very vivid. I kept thinking this is a dream, I have to wake up. She insisted it wasn't a dream and I didn't have the usual dream-like physical characteristics. I don't believe it was real and insisted we go to my parents' house to confront them and leave this dream. They looked so happy. In my real life they got divorced 18 years ago. My formerly incredibly successful brother was living at home. He was a pothead that had no motivation to better himself. I started to remember that about him. It was as if all my real-life memories were disappearing and this was my reality. I kept telling her I didn't believe it. We drove to the house I live in now that I just built and moved into 15 months ago. It was vacant lot. We drove by the facility I work at and I recognized it, but I didn't work there. I couldn't even tell you what I did there. This was becoming very confusing. I thought I'm going to wake up any minute, but I never did. I lived with this girl. We had a son then a daughter. I can see their faces. I can hear their voices. We watched them grow. The son was in baseball and the daughter in gymnastics. We had pool parties, went on vacations. I'd ask about my other wife and she'd tell me I needed to take my medication again. I'd talk to the doctor and this life I remembered was just a figment of my imagination. All of a sudden, I was forgetting about my real life. Years had passed. I couldn't decide what was real and what wasn't. She wasn't narrating our life anymore. It was just my life. I would take the kids to school. To practices. Come home to my wife who I loved. I kept thinking it had been too long to be a dream. I went back to the doctor and told him what I remembered and he chalked it up to me being schizophrenic. We struggled though that for years. I had to quit drinking to stop the memories. It was so hard to function some days. I knew I had a family somewhere. My work struggled. I spent all my time trying to find my other wife. Then I found her on Facebook. She lived 1,500 miles away. I flew out to see her. I went to her house. She was overweight and depressed. I tried telling her I knew her. I was arrested and after posting bail I flew back home. My wife was so supportive. I began to realize this life was real and I had imagined the other life. We watched Shutter Island and I was just another nut job that had made it through life somehow. Once I accepted this I was fine. I didn't have any more problems. My other wife dropped charges and I was back at work without issues. Years later, I have just retired. I'm recounting the days 20 years ago when I thought I had another life. My wife tells me I can. All I have to do is go into our closet. I was confused. She proceeds to tell me that she had gone into the closet we went into at the gathering I used to remember and I can go back. I felt so confused. I asked her, did you know this whole time and you did this to me? She told me she too remembered the gathering. She had gone into the closet and lived her life as though we never split. She said she made it until I died at the age of 93. She came back and got me. Now I'm losing my mind. I'm old, have lived nearly 50 years with this woman. I don't really even remember my old life. I remember my original kids' names but not even what they look like. She tells me we can go back, but if I want, we never have to return to the closet and we can live the life we have together. I got up and walked to the closet. Walked inside and walked back out into the gathering from the beginning. As if I'd never left. My original wife was there, we left and came home with our kids. We went to bed and I didn't say a word about what had happened. This morning it was surreal driving to work. I felt like I was driving to the wrong place. It took me until 8 a.m. sitting at my desk to accept this reality. I remember so many vivid details. I don't know what life I'm in. I am happy I have my now wife and my now life. Kinda wish I had the other life's bank account. But I feel like I've lived twice. I don't want to go back to be with a GF, but I do want to know what happened to everyone I knew for so many years. Like 99% of my life has returned. But the 1% that is different is there. I remember two pasts. My wife listened and gave me a big hug and told me she's glad I chose her. But did I? I think I did. I felt so much more wiser at work today. So much more mature. Like I had lived before and got to do it all over again, and I have much more confidence in my decisions. I can't find any loopholes in my memory other than I don't remember who won World Series or Super Bowls in the other life. Nothing that stands out that this was a figment of my imagination. Biggest glitch I've ever experienced. My dad and I like to go geocaching. If you're not familiar, geocaches are small containers hidden in public areas, usually with a logbook and sometimes small trinkets inside. You upload the GPS coordinates to a website with some information about the cache, and then people will look for them, sign the logbook, and maybe trade out trinkets. There's an app now that adds some functionality, ability to add photos, notes, hints, that kind of thing. We go to look for a specific cache one day. We look everywhere, can't find it. Frustrating, but it happens. We go back a week or two later. Can't find it. It's been marked as found semi-recently, otherwise we would just assume it had gone missing. Happens sometimes. We finally give up and go elsewhere to find a couple other caches. A couple weeks later, we're out caching and decided to go back to try one more time. I check the app, and see it was found since we last tried. We look around for a long time, use a hint left by the most recent finder, and finally find it. I pull out my pen to mark the log, and when I unfurl it the world stops for a moment because I see my dad's and my names written at the very end of the log, in my handwriting. I call my dad over and we're looking at it together. We're both confused and freaked out. I take a look again at the app and realize that the last find was from our account, and the hint we followed was one that we had left. It's been years and we still talk about it some. It's one of those things where no matter how many people I tell this story to, I kind of assume people don't believe me because it's just so weird and such an obvious merging of timelines. So it's nice to talk to my dad about it because I know he 100% believes me. I think we looked at the dates and our first find was on the date that we had last looked for it prior to the second find, but we both definitely would not have forgotten finding it, because it had been driving us crazy wondering where it was. Honestly, I'm not sure why we didn't just chalk it up to a cache that had gone missing. We both just couldn't stop thinking about it. I also don't know how I didn't notice the username from the recent find and hint was our username until after we found the cache. It was just weird overall. Definitely makes for a great story though.
We lost about 4 hours of time in 30 seconds. I'm not sure if this is considered a glitch, a time slip, or just delusion, but this is something that happened to me and my family that we can't explain. Summer 2011, in the car was me, 19, my sister, dad and stepmom. We were on our way to a campsite. We had other family joining us. My uncle and nan, both arriving separately, called us saying they were setting off, did we need anything from the shops, and to let us know their arrival time. We were over halfway there. They would be arriving about 3 hours after us. We carried on driving, switched radio stations and went through a tunnel. When we came out, the phone was ringing again. It was my nan asking where we were, kind of relieved that she had got hold of us. My nana and uncle had already arrived at the campsite. My dad said, "Oh, so you're already there, save us a pitch then," and my nan responded, "Where have you been, if you're still on your way?" The conversation didn't make sense. My dad got frustrated and said, "What do you mean, where have we been? You just spoke to us." My nan told us, "We've been calling you because we couldn't get hold of you." My stepmom pointed to the time on the radio, and about 4 hours had passed. 4 hours had passed in 30 seconds. My dad ended the call with my nan, and for a moment we were silent. My sister said, "What's going on?" My dad said the time must have changed when we changed the radio station and our family was playing a dumb joke. Our phones showed time had passed. Again silence. We arrived, briefly spoke about it with family and ignored it. We have spoke about it maybe 2 to 3 times. My dad is either convinced that we went through a time vortex, got abducted, or we were jokingly drugged by our stepmom. She's a GP. My stepmom says we must have got the times wrong, or at worst had some shared delusions or amnesia. Either way, we don't know what happened. Was told my future in a Wetherspoons pub in Manchester. This happened years ago, and after some scrolling on here it reminded me of when I met this really off, weird guy in a pub in Manchester whose vibes, when I think about it, give me chills to my core. In 2018 I went to go watch Chase and Status at the Academy. Now beforehand I went for a meal and some drinks with my ex. Whilst we are having a drink, there's this really strange guy at the bar area near us, and what weirded me out about this guy is I had a close friend pass away from a drug overdose a few months prior at the age of 19, but this random fella's vibe just gave me a really similar feeling to my friend, even though the man was a lot older. As we're in the pub and drinks are flowing, I get speaking to this fella and he seems nice enough, and he mentions, "I'm a clairvoyant, do you want me to tell you your future?" I hate stuff like this, it weirds me out. I don't want no bad news or worrying about something before it happened. My partner at the time wanted to hear what he had to say though, so he told me my future. At the time it annoyed me because she's the one who asked why am I getting the rundown? So he's told me all of this happened by the way that I'm going to fuck up and lose my girlfriend, which we didn't want to hear before I'm trying to go to a rave with her. He then said I'm going to get in a fight and lose my front teeth and I'm going to get stabbed, and all these things will happen within 3 months. My partner at the time shrugged it off and just told me not to listen to him, he's a loon. Now, after dropping these bombshells on me, he casually eats 3 Xanax in front of me and gave me this weird as fuck familiar smile, downs his drink, and just walks off. The friend who passed away, Xanax was involved, and I can't explain it. I know I sound crazy, but I'm just so weirded out by the interaction. Lo and behold, the most specific events he told me were going to happen happened within 3 months of each other, exactly how he said. I've literally just asked my ex if she remembered the encounter because it was one of the most strange in my life.
It's true. Glitches, the simulation, it's all true. So I was driving down my road towards my house and I see my neighbor spraying the road in front of his house, which is right after mine. I really didn't think much of it, figured maybe he spilled something and was spraying off whatever he spilled. I pulled into my driveway. I usually walk in front of my car, jump on my porch and open the door, but this time I walk around the back of my car, and when I look up, my neighbor is now spraying off his car that's now in the road where he was spraying before. I figured his girlfriend must have just pulled up right when I was pulling in, and that's why I didn't see her drive up. There was just a couple seconds from the time I parked to when I seen the car, so naturally I'm expecting to see the driver somewhere either in the car or walking out. But she never walks into view, so I start walking over there. In my gut I had a feeling something wasn't right. It was like I knew that car didn't just pull up and was there the whole time. But it wasn't there, or I would have seen it right, so I walk up to my neighbor and say, "This is a dumb question, but was your car here the whole time, or did it just pull up now?" He looks at me a little funny and says, "No, it's been here for the past 30 minutes, I've been washing it." I tell him that when I pulled up this car was not parked here. I say, "You were spraying the road, there was no car." Not wanting to sound any more crazy than I already did, I turn and walk away. I've known the guy my whole life, so he just laughs, not realizing I'm freaking out inside. My heat racing like I just saw a ghost or something. I seem to experience this type of glitch pretty often, but it's always something small like my lighter or something on the counter that I could have overlooked, although it's been getting more clear that things are gone one second then back the next. There's still the possibility I just didn't notice it. I never really know for sure. This time though I know for absolute certainty that car was 100% for sure not there. The road had a big circle of soapy bubbles and he was spraying in the center as if there was a car there, but I just couldn't see it. The neighbors next to him have a big trailer parked in the road, and I remember I could see nothing but pavement from where I was all the way to that trailer. No car in between. I think deep down we all know that the world we live in is just too amazing for us to have it all figured out, so experiencing something like this, it just kinda confirms something I already knew. And even though this has happened, it's almost as if it never happened. I still have 1,000,001 questions. Thanks for reading my true story. I hope you all enjoy the glitch of my life. I may or may not be from another world. I won't know till I die, again. Yes, I legally died before. My heart had stopped and my body went blue. I was entirely unaware of this having happened to me, nor did I know till the day afterwards I had accidentally ingested medication someone who required it had put into her own glass of juice. That medication stopped my heart, but isn't one which is capable of producing the effects I'm about to describe, and so I consider it irrelevant to what happened, though it was nonetheless the catalyst, and the experiences that I'll never forget. Putting any of this into words is quite challenging, but I found myself in another state of being where I had no memory of my life and felt I had always existed in this other realm. My consciousness was split into multiple perspectives, although it seems the majority of my viewpoint was on a boat traveling within a world of water. The sky was water, the boat was on water, and below the water, there were other layers of water. Some of me was looking up at the boat from below the water, some in the sky water, one was the captain of the boat, and others were the water. The me who was the captain felt the most separate from me, and they asked, without words, whether I wanted to stay on course, but to know if I did, I could never return. I didn't understand what they meant about returning, as I didn't remember anything other than being in this water world, which felt like a world of pure information, connection, and love. However, because I wasn't fully integrated or, well, on board, I wasn't fully connected to that infinite unity. When the me captain told me about returning, the world filled with lightning which permeated the world above, below, and around the boat. The captain instructed me that to return, I'd need to hold on to the electricity. When I did, the lightning zapped me, and it was very literally shocking. The electricity connected each of my disparate nodes of consciousness and began merging them, pulling them together while also pulling them upwards. Holding on was extremely difficult. It felt like eternal spinning in a non-Euclidean wheel, but I held on. The more I did, the more visions I saw as I spun of countless worlds and countless lives. They passed so fast it was dizzying, and yet each seemed to compress lifetimes of experiences and emotions. I felt like I was being pulled at the speed of light, which, given the nature of electricity, makes sense, until eventually, I had my first resurfacing to my life, seeing medics all around me who had just defibrillated my heart, hence the electricity. I suddenly understood what was happening, and the fear of that sent me back downwards into the storm. Emotions and memories, both real and imagined, far too personal to share, flashed all around me. I was again told I could let go if I wanted to. I'd not be punished, it just would mean I could not, at this time, see any more of this other realm. You'd think the choice would be obvious at this point, but it wasn't. A part of me felt the world I had discovered had more for me than the one I'd be leaving. But I thought of my lover, who was watching over the medics crying, of my parents, of the idea of giving up on myself and what that meant to me and would mean to others. So I held on and pushed through the endless visions and resurfaced again. I was alive, I am alive, and so very thankful for it. Whether or not this world is truly and actually the one I left, I can never know until it's my due time to return to that state, which I have no plans on doing anytime soon through anything other than meditation and trance states. I truly hope it is. It doesn't bother me if it isn't, but I can't bear the idea of the pain I nearly caused those who care for me. Nonetheless, occasionally I do think I did actually die in that. Well, I may be living somewhere else now. Thanks for hearing me out. This stuff isn't easy to write about.